So Mike, you talk a lot about having experience and finding someone who knows what they're doing because of how much they've done this job. Is there a time that you can think of that in this industry, while you've been in it, that experience did make all the difference for you?
Yeah, I actually can. There are several stories that I can come up with, but I can tell you recently a challenge that you just wouldn't expect something like this, but I'm representing a buyer through a home purchase, and we're negotiating through the inspection. So I had submitted my inspection objection, waiting for the sellers to respond with the seller's realtor. The seller's realtor was not responding to us. I'm coming up on a deadline. If the deadline comes and goes, the transaction falls apart. So I'm pushing, and then finally she responds, and unfortunately, the seller had been killed in a motorcycle accident. So you think, oh God, what do we do with this? But I did immediately have to step back for a second and say, hey, take all the emotion out of this. Buyer, I had her withdraw the inspection objection because if that date comes and goes, the transaction goes away. So she still wanted to purchase the home, but now we have to tread lightly because it's an emotional time for that family. And so I'm also dealing with another realtor on the other side and trying to do the best I can to coach her on how to proceed from here. Now we have to locate a will. Now we have to locate the family members. Now we have to work through all the probate and still try and meet dates and deadlines. It's the first time I've had something tragic like that, but it's not the first time I've had a death like that, or I've had an odd situation come up where you're like, well, hang on a second. We just need to navigate through this. Here's my resources. Here's my attorney. Let me get a hold of my accountant. Let me get a hold of this person. And we start navigating through it. So, because ultimately, my client, as tragic as it is, still wants to purchase the home. And we're saying, how can we do this, but also still be sensitive to that family, because they're going to be going through an emotional, difficult time. But we can all get there. And ultimately, it's best for them as well, because they don't want to have this home to deal with, once they settle the estate, and now say, okay, now we got to put the place on the market. So if we can get it over with, and they can move on, it's better for all parties. So ultimately, the goal always is to sit at the closing or after closing and everybody says, you know what, that all worked out. I didn't feel like I was taken advantage of. I feel like everybody treated me fairly. I felt like I dealt with a professional. That's the goal from my perspective, but I also want my client to feel like, hey, that went well for me. And I felt like somebody looked out for my best interest.